Welcome to Let's Talk to Animals. My name is Shannon Cutts, and I'm an animal sensitive and intuitive Reiki master practitioner and animal communication teacher here with animalloveland.com. And for our purposes today, I am also your friendly neighborhood hostess for the Let's Talk to Animals podcast. We are now in our 5th season, and I have had the great good fortune of interviewing amazing light workers, holistic practitioners, healers, communicators, and intuitives from around the world. And today is no exception. In fact, you are in for a beautiful treat from the land down under. We have Anna Anderson from Quantum Living Podcast joining us today to share her unique insights on the intersection of interspecies consciousness. We're sharing our planet with one another, with Mama Earth herself, with so many different animal species, and there is so much variety. There are so many different perspectives that sometimes it can stretch the mind to the point of impossibility. And that is what quantum living is all about. It's about expansion, it's about growth, it's about evolution. And so I have invited Anna here today to help us understand what it means to live at the quantum level. This is a word that we hear a lot, it's thrown about a lot, but sometimes actually developing a personal understanding and a personal relationship with quantum living can feel hard to define or even out of reach. This is Anna's specialty. I'll let her tell you a little bit more about all of the different ways that she can work with you and about her wonderful podcast. But for now, I just want to invite Anna. First of all, Anna, welcome. So
Thank
happy
you.
to have
Thank
you.
you so.
So happy to have you. And
Thank you.
I want to invite Anna to introduce herself to you and share her story in her own words. How did you come to understand this quantum time period that we are living in, where so many of us are waking up? So I discovered your podcast, Quantum Living, in that most mysterious way that intuitive living happens. I was clicking away on the internet, and one click led to another. And before long, I was listening and was immediately drawn to your message that everything is energy. And so keen to hear more wisdom about the intersection of science and spirituality. Boy, did that sing to my heart. And so I would just love it if you could share a little bit more about your personal story so they can get to know you and also understand how you came to do this work that you do today.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I'm delighted to be invited to be on your podcast. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Well, my personal story is probably not uncommon, as I'm sure most of your guests will say. I had a very strong connection with the spirit since birth, pretty much. Had vivid memories of my past lives and pretty quickly realized that there was much more to life than what we perceive through our 5 senses. Death, as explained by the Catholic Church, didn't make any sense to me, and I intuitively knew that we are much more powerful than we realize. And so pain and suffering, for example, and all bad experiences didn't make sense to me. I knew that there was a better way to live, some sort of secret that must be uncovered. And so very early, I embarked on a quest to find out how life really works. So the emphasis is on really works. I was drawn to personal and spiritual development, which became pretty much my passion, if not an obsession, since my kindergarten, as I could read from the age of 3. I never forgot the language I spoke in my previous life, which happened to be in the same country. So I could read without being ever taught. Since then, I have read every book on personal and spiritual growth I could lay my hands on. Over the years, I walked on fire, explored energy healing and alternative therapies, practiced Buddhism, learned meditation, spirit channeling, past life regression, and explored hypnosis, psychology, NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming, and finally discovered quantum physics. I was looking for answers, or at least for some direction, which I found in the works of many great teachers and thought leaders, such as Tony Robbins, Greg Braden, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Dr. Joe Dispenza, Louise Hay, Dr. Wayne Dyer, Napoleon Hill, Eckhart Tolle, Dr. Michael Newton, and many, many others, including the channeled material Seth Speaks, channeled by Jane Roberts, the Lazarus material, channeled by Jack Purcell, and Bashar, channeled by Daryl Anka. In the early 2000s, I completed a certified life coaching training with NLP and started my life coaching practice as I wanted to help people to improve their lives with what I have learned myself. Then at some point, I came across quantum physics and saw that it bridges science and spirituality, which really resonated with me. I realized that this intersection is a sacred space, possibly the secret to how life works, which I wanted to find, and a very unique space, a powerful recipe for empowered living. It was, I think, in 2009 or thereabouts when I attended a 3-day workshop with Dr. Joe Dispenza here in Australia. I bought and read his books and never looked back. I found the direction for my work and I coined its name or a title, Quantum Living, which I eventually adopted as my brand and my trademark, and have been teaching its principles, which I have further developed and built upon with my research and psychic insights ever since. So, in essence, what is quantum living? It is living consciously, understanding how life works at the energy level and how we can work with the energy to navigate through life in the full awareness of it rather than on automatic, driven by our unconscious programs and habits. It is about being self-aware, self-empowered, and free, learning the secrets of ancient spiritual teachings, now confirmed by quantum physics. So here is the nexus that gives us many practical tools and strategies to improve our lives.
Inspiring. I love that when we start to bring our awake awareness to those unconscious patterns and that subconscious programming sings to my heart. And so many of the names that you mentioned, in particular, Dr. Michael Newton, I'm in process right now reading his books and experiencing past life regression and life between lives regression. And boy, has that added a new dimension to my own work and awareness, adding so much to my life. Here on Let's Talk to Animals, so many in our listening community are somewhat too very aware that intuition is a part of the human organism. It can be a part of the human experience. We have different degrees of familiarity with terms like intuition and psychic senses. Some of us, we've come to it a little bit later in life, like myself. Others, maybe they were very self-aware very early on in life, like you were. You actually mentioned in your bio, which I found fascinating, being an indigo child descended from a psychic lineage. So, my question to you is, were you always aware of your heritage and what I'm calling your intuitive inheritance? I don't know if you look at it that way or not. So, I'd love to hear about that as well. Or did that make up part of your spiritual journey in this lifetime, kind of recognizing that each lifetime we come in with kind of a set of lessons, if you will, a la Dr. Newton? We come in with a set of
Mhm.
lessons that we're looking to learn and maybe some milestones that we're hoping to reach. And so I'd love to hear more about how knowing this information about yourself kind of informed your growth in this lifetime.
Mm, Great question. As I mentioned earlier, I've had very strong intuition and connection with the spirit pretty much from birth. I mean, I don't know when I didn't know any different. And to me, it was natural. So, but as is often the case, the peer pressure, the lack of understanding in those days when I was little, pretty much forced me to not so much completely block those skills, but certainly to suppress them for a number of years. But still, this didn't prevent me from being aware that what we are seeing with and perceiving with our five senses, it's just a tiny, tiny part of what life and existence and consciousness is really all. Now, your question about my psychic lineage is very interesting. And no one has ever asked me about it, even though it is on my website, actually. So, great question. I wasn't aware of my psychic lineage until my late teens. My mother's family had the roots in Hungary, in particular, the female Hungarian gypsies. And for those listeners who are not familiar with this, gypsies are, or European gypsies are, nomad folk groups, well known as fortune tellers. So they basically travel from town to town, village to village in those days across Europe. And whenever they came to your town, people were rushing to have their palm read and find out about their future. So they were well known from their psychic and intuitive skills, which those days was called future telling. So it looks like I have their psychic gene, which could be both the physical and the soul gene in my DNA. And it didn't come as a surprise, and it just makes sense. It's unfortunate that I wasn't able to get more information and more details about it, but there were many secrets in my family. Not much information was preserved and passed on, and most documents obviously were lost during the war. And my parents, or my mother in particular, never talked much about the past or her family or her ancestors. I believe that it was my great great auntie who was a gypsy, a Hungarian gypsy. And I actually feel a connection with her. I often in my meditation can see an image of a female gypsy, and I am working on establishing better communication with her to perhaps find out a bit more about it. So, with my naturally open sixth sense since birth, I have been drawn to the unknown and the mysteries of life, and developing my psychic sense was, I guess, part of my spiritual journey ever since.
So fascinating. There are so many different ways in which we can receive information about our lineage. And I know there are many people around the world, probably many in our listening community, who can relate to what you share about not having access to written documents, not having access for one reason or another to records to help them put some context around who they are, why they are the way that they are, and the inheritance that they've received. And so it's a beautiful invitation if you're listening to this and you do feel that block or that frustration to consider there might be another way. In fact, Anna, you teach meditation, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I know that's very important in your work. And so you might just try on for size, asking yourself if you could perhaps reach out to your lineage, to your ancestors, to your relations in dreams time or in meditation or in a guided visualization, and ask them to send you some information that way. Ask to develop a relationship with them. And that could really heal some things for you and just give you more context and confidence in your life. And speaking of relationships, of course, here on Let's Talk to Animals, if you have been listening along with us for any length of time, you know we're all about supporting soulful interspecies conversations. And so, Anna, I'm curious about how you personally experience the role that animals can play in our human consciousness and our spiritual awakening. Of course, we've got a sister podcast episode on your quantum living podcast where we go into a
Yes.
little bit more detail about that as well. So I will put that link in the show notes so you can catch up on both episodes and get a bigger picture perspective of this particular question. But one area, as you and I have chatted about a little bit before, that I find so especially fascinating is how so many people are drawn to particular species. For you, it feels like horses have been so powerful for you. For me, I have always had such a special relationship with birds. So, do you feel like there may be a special message for you or for any pet parent that could be hidden within their desire to have the company of a particular species, maybe even like a spirit animal or a totem animal, or a message from the quantum field that they feel particularly predisposed to receive through an animal messenger?
I love this question. Thank you. I really love this question. And I would like to preface it with a little bit of context and share some of my insights about the soul journey. I believe and I understand that the soul journey includes incarnations in every kingdom, from the mineral kingdom as crystals and rocks, to the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom, as well as the ecosystems kingdom with the oceans and even the planets, moons, and the suns. There are, of course, other kingdoms in the universe we don't even know about just yet. There are also many levels within each kingdom, and they progress with growing complexity of the entity and their consciousness, from the collective to group to individual. For example, minerals and plants have a collective consciousness, as I understand. Fish, birds, and reptiles have a number of group consciousnesses for their species, and mammals have individual consciousness fragments. As humans, we are part of animal kingdom, not the human kingdom in its own right, and above the animals, as many people believe. So once we are born as a human, and I think this is really an important point in this conversation, and an aspect and concept in this conversation, we have already lived in all those kingdoms and in animal kingdom in particular. And so our connection with the animal kingdom is permanent and it never ends. We've been there, put simply. I still have memories of running as a wild horse, memories and dreams of running as a wild horse across the prairie, and as a little marsupial, eating lychees, out of all things, somewhere on a tree in the Indonesian rainforest, which is fascinating. But I know that these are not just my dreams, but actual memories. And to answer your question, what role animals play in our spiritual awakening, I can say that animals are absolutely integral. Could you imagine this planet populated only with humans and no other species? It would be boring to begin with. Animals help us at two levels. One, they help us remember when we lived in their kingdom as animals, to awaken our soul memory that we are always connected. And two, which is crucial. They open our hearts with empathy, compassion, and love. You could try this experiment. Bring along a cute little puppy to a workplace, a party, or some other social gathering, and notice what happens and how people react. Most people will want to pat and cuddle the puppy, cooing to it like to a baby. And the energy in the room noticeably changes. People relax and smile. You know, I love all animals, but especially dogs and cats, and have a very special place in my heart for the horses. As I mentioned, I often dream of being a white horse running free, and I know that it's not a symbolic dream, but my soul memory. Why? And this could be a clue for your listeners. Because I wake up from such dreams with a sense of longing. I am longing at some level for this life, or that life as a horse. I always talk to animals, just like I talk to the plants, trees, crystals, rocks, the ocean. I naturally communicate with all types of consciousnesses on the planet. And if someone says, "Do you really talk to the plants and trees?" I say, "Of course, don't you?" There's also another reason for feeling a special connection to a particular species or an animal, and that's the person's animal spirit guide or animal totem, a power animal. Now, there are many descriptions of how they are different. To me, your animal spirit guide is your power animal. And it's a species that chose to guide and support you with their spiritual energy in this lifetime on your journey. So if you know your spirit animal or your power animal, you might like to have a photo or a drawing or a painting or a little figurine of your power animal, and also connect with it in your meditation because they are here for you to help you.
I love this idea. And it's so funny that you say, "Of course I talk to the plants, don't you?" So often when I share with new animal communication students that one of the ways I started integrating my practice into my daily life was instead of just blindly watering every plant on a set schedule, I began asking each house plant, and there are many in this house, "Do you need water?" And it's so funny to see some of the reactions I get. Really? And they'll tell you. And I'm not always right, but I'm getting a lot better at sensing where they are in their need for water. And so that is a great example of one way to just start that dialogue. Now, you mentioned perhaps inviting your spirit animal into your meditation, but what about for somebody that doesn't know what species or who their spirit animal is? Could you suggest maybe a very simple meditation or a question that they could work with in their meditation to maybe start to find out the answer to that question?
Absolutely. And we can talk about meditation a little later, but a quick and effective technique or a tool that I might suggest to your listeners is just go to a quiet place. So, ideally, maybe somewhere in the nature or in a quiet room. Just sit down, close your eyes, and relax. Take a few deep breaths and relax, tuning inwards. And after a few moments, simply ask the question, "I'd like to know who is my power animal." And please note, I say who, not what, on purpose. Because to me, who, when we are addressing or describing an entity or referring to an entity as who, implies consciousness or conscious being. When we refer to something as what, it implies usually a non conscious object, put it this way. So I actually like referring to animals as who is my power animal. And then listen. For a few moments, just stay quietly and listen. Tune in. You might hear a word, you might see an image, you might just get a feeling or sensation. Don't try to force anything. Just be quiet and allow this information to come to you. Now, it may not come straight away. It might take maybe 2 or 3 such sittings, but the more often you do it, the stronger is your intention to find out and bring your spirit animal or your spirit guide to your awareness. Now, if you ask me, does every person have a spirit animal? My answer is, I believe so. Just like we all have our spirit guides. So an animal spirit guide is no different to a different type of spirit guide, which could be an ascended master, could be an angel, could be your deceased loved one, could be any consciousness on the other side of the veil of that physical 3D dimension that we live in. So yes, I believe that everyone has a animal spirit guide.
To which I say, lucky us. We are so lucky. So, this is so interesting. I love the idea, especially for those of us who we do come to our awareness of intuition, of quantum living, of waking up, of evolution later in life. And as I'm listening to you, I'm imagining a me who maybe was never told that talking with animals was something that wasn't possible. Like, imagine right now, as you're listening to us chatting, imagine that you live in a world where everybody just assumes and behaves like talking with animals is totally natural and normal, where receiving a power animal spirit guide, knowing their name, knowing their species, feeling their conscious energy. And I love this distinction you make, because this is such a huge part of the journey, is being very aware how every word counts, how the meaning of every word matters, the care that we take with every single word that we choose matters. And so just imagine if you were you, but instead of being told that animal communication is woo woo, or that quantum science is pseudoscience, or whatever messages that we may have picked up from earlier generations and maybe colleagues or people in our network or relative, imagine you lived in a world where you were always told that interspecies communication is as natural as breathing. And of course, we live in a quantum universe where everything is interconnected in beautiful, wise ways. How would that change your awareness of you in this world? How would that change your awareness of the power that you have to give and receive love and make this world a safer, better place for all beings? It's pretty magical to think about. And speaking of thinking about and imagining, Anna, you also mentioned that you have made it your life's quest. I love that you could read from the age of 3. Reading has always been one of life's great joys for me. You mentioned that ever since you learned to read, you dove into books and teachings and learning everything you can about how life really works. And I would love to hear some of the tidbits, maybe some of your favorite choice morsels about what you've learned. Can you share any highlights, especially, of course, from we love animal perspectives, but what have you learned about how life really works? I would say this is the one question, other than what happens after you die, this is probably the one burning question that every embodied human soul has.
Beautiful question. And it is a huge body of knowledge. And even in terms of my own learnings and research and findings and experience and practice, which probably would take the whole new episode. But just for the purpose of this conversation, what I would like to share is 4 key highlights from what I have learned and discovered that are relevant to this conversation. The first concept that I really feel is important is that everything is energy, including our thoughts and emotions that carry information. And this is the basics of understanding and accepting telepathy, through which we communicate with other people and animals. So if everyone listening to this podcast could just for a moment accept that everything is energy, including our thoughts and emotions that carry information, and then think of communicating with your animals, the bridge has been created and the process will be much easier because now we understand, okay, this is how it works. It's not just a mambo jumbo. The second point is that consciousness is non-local, which effectively means is everywhere. It means that we can access the information we need from the quantum field, and it is not in our head. Our brain serves as a receiver and perhaps temporary storage of data. And this principle explains how remote healing works, how remote viewing works. So you can do a Reiki healing on a person or animal who are on another hemisphere or another planet for that matter. It doesn't matter. You don't need to be in the same room with them because the consciousness is non-local. You can access the information you need in the quantum field at any time. And by the way, I feel that we are being taught this principle by the universe with the internet. Okay? You are in the US, I'm in Australia, and yet we are together. In this space and time, we are together. Our two consciousness fragments have blended for the duration of this conversation. Hopefully for much longer, but we are connected. We are not in the same room, okay? We are thousands of miles apart. So this is another important point. Now, reincarnation is, of course, a big one. I mean, I didn't actually discover reincarnation per se, as I knew from day one that reincarnation is a fact of life. I vividly remembered my past lives, vividly. And to me, it was normal. But I did learn that we reincarnate through the animal kingdom before we are born as human, and as I mentioned earlier, through all the kingdoms. So this is the information that came to me later on in the course of my research and studies. So that's an immediate connection. And the fourth principle, let's call it, from quantum physics that I feel is relevant to this conversation and this topic is the power of imagination in creating our reality. And that's when guided meditation comes in. When we visualize that we communicate with our pet, for example, and can understand their message, we are creating this scenario in the quantum field. So while initially it may be just our imagination, when we keep doing it time after time, it will soon become real through our intention, because the wave, our intention will collapse, just getting a bit technical here, will collapse the wave of possibility into a particle of matter. So knowing and understanding this principle helps us relax into it because it is a scientifically proven fact that our imagination is creating our reality. So let's use it. Let's use our imagination as often as we can. And let's don't be discouraged if something we want to manifest doesn't happen instantly or the next day or in a week. It will happen. Because in fact, when we start doubting that this will happen, that we can actually manifest, our doubt breaks the energetic link and weakens our intention. And it is for a reason that on this physical plane, we are, in most cases at least, we are not able to manifest things instantaneously because we need to learn the process first. So that's why we have a time lapsing, say, could be an hour, a day, a week, a month, sometimes a few months, depending on the situation, on what we want to manifest in the physical reality. And if something totally unexplainable happens very quickly, we call it a miracle, which opens the door to another conversation, whether what we call a miracle is a spiritual or spirit intervention or assistance or help, and or a work at the quantum level of our own power. So this could be another whole
Yes,
conversation.
it could. That is
So to
fascinating.
Yeah. So to recap very quickly for the benefit of the audience, everything is energy, including our thoughts and emotions that carry information. Consciousness is non-local. It is everywhere. It's a fact of life. And the power of our imagination creates our reality.
So here I am sitting here listening to you, imagining a world where we all intend to communicate with animals. We take that wave of pure potential, the energy of our own imagination, we focus it, we create the particle of experience that animal communication is real, that it happens, and that it happens with us. Would you say
Yes.
that that is a meditation that my students could work with?
This is a very short, well, you can call it meditation or very, very short, very quick tool or
Mhm.
technique that anyone can use without necessarily going into meditation. And it is effective. All you need to do is, as I said, close your eyes, become quiet, tune in within, and then go through the process, ask the question, and listen. However, when you mention meditation, well, meditation isn't necessary to have intuitive conversations with your animals or with people for that matter, with other people for that matter. But, and there is always a but, it depends on the person. Just like some people are naturally psychic and don't need any courses or classes on developing psychic intuition, while others will benefit from some instruction, practice, and guidance to learn the process until they don't need it anymore. So the same principle applies, in my view, to intuitive communication with animals or any consciousness for that matter, whether on this plane or in other dimensions. Just to put it in a bit of a context, the main purpose of meditation is to lower your brain frequency from beta to alpha down to theta, depending on what you want to achieve in a meditation, in order to communicate with the consciousnesses that operate on a different frequency. You need to be literally on the same wavelength or very close to it, or get into a state that serves as a bridge, allowing such a connection. This is a complex process, and we still don't quite understand it. And the first question we ask, how come I need to lower my brain frequency in order to align with a much higher frequency of the spirit, which seems like a paradox? And the answer is, which I can give at this stage, don't fully understand the process myself, but the answer that I can come up with at this stage is brain frequency 4 to 8 cycles per second to resonate with the frequency of the quantum field. And it opens a communication channel with other dimensions via telepathy. And in fact, even the low alpha brain waves, which are between 9 and 14 hertz or cycles per second, which is our daydreaming state, very relaxed daydreaming state, facilitates telepathy. The guidance in a meditation is to help you get there and learn the process. It is not the only key to accessing altered states of consciousness, but a tool to help you get there. Now, many people still prefer using guided meditation after years of practice, as they might find it easier to follow and find it enjoyable. So, my recommendation for your students and anyone wanting to learn telepathy telepathic communication with animals, is to start with guided meditations and learn to quiet your mind and get into the alpha state where you can learn the process. And then start practicing getting into this lower state, this altered state of consciousness without meditation. Again, it may take practice, and this will differ for different individuals, but it is a useful and helpful process to follow. And just very quickly, if I may, speaking of meditation, I'm actually working on a guided meditation. I produce guided meditations myself, and I'm working on a guided meditation to help people connect and communicate with animals, our pets that have passed, our power animals, and all creatures in the animal kingdom. And this meditation will take you down to the lower alpha brainwaves, which is ideal for telepathy. And it should be available on my website probably in a couple of weeks or so.
That is fantastic. And what makes me so particularly happy about this is that knee-jerk reaction that so many aspiring communicators have when they hear the word meditation. But I can't meditate because I can't quiet my mind. So that very simple. See, for me, I've had a meditation practice since I was 19. I'm 53 now, so I'm pretty comfortable with that. Doesn't hold a fear factor charge for me anymore. But that very first so simple instruction that you give, just find a quiet place and quiet your mind, that stops almost everyone at the door. And I don't even know if it's just a cultural perception, especially for those of us who grew up in certain eras where all of this was relegated to woo woo. And especially for those of us like myself who grew up in the Bible Belt South here in America, where if you meditated, it meant you weren't a good Christian, et cetera, et cetera. And so that simple instruction can feel like a gatekeeper. And for me, I've noticed that many of my students respond really well to guided meditations. Number one, because it gives their brain something productive to do. And number two, because they don't feel like they're going, quote unquote, in there into their own minds, into their own beings alone. So I love that you're offering this resource, and I'm excited to share it with our listeners. I hope you will share a little bit more information. We're at that moment where I'm going to ask you to share how our community can reach out to you, certainly how they can access this guided meditation. I love listening to your voice, like just listening to you talk. Like I feel like I'm going into a calmer, more balanced brainwave state. And I feel like this is going to be a really good resource for my students and for anyone who's listening who really wants to go deeper. So, can you share a little bit more about how to reach out to you, how to connect with you, how to access the meditation, and how to listen to Quantum Living podcast?
Absolutely. And before I do that, I just would like to also give another quick strategy.
Oh, we'd love it.
A meditative strategy, which is particularly effective for people who find it really difficult, really hard to quiet their mind with the constant chatter. And even for them to sit down for 5 minutes poses a big challenge, huge challenge. So here is, if you like, an intermediate or transitional step, walking meditation. Go for a walk. So either on the beach or through a forest, ideally in an open space and without any challenging pathway that you need to pay attention to where you're walking. So that's why probably a beach is an ideal place, because it's just an open space and you walk on the sand. So for those people who find it really challenging, I recommend trying first a walking meditation. So just start walking on the beach and think of nothing. Focus on the sound of the waves, the gentle breeze, the sound of the seagulls, and all other sounds that are natural on the beach. Not necessarily people talking or playing loud music. You don't want that. But even if that happens, just ignore it and focus on the natural sound. And what happens is with a rhythmic movement of the body, which is walking, so walking slowly at the same pace for, say, 5, 10, 15 minutes, will quiet your mind, and it will help your mind to relax and just focus on the environment. So this might be helpful.
Very helpful, especially because we are a nature loving bunch. And so being able to give ourselves permission to take a nature walk, and we'll be learning a new skill, and we'll be connecting with animals and nature. It's a natural fit. And I love this suggestion. This is such a good fit for our community. So, yes, I am definitely going to try this. I love this idea. Most of my meditations are done in the morning or during a session or in the evening. Very rarely do I give myself the gift of taking a walking meditation. So I love this idea. Thank you. So please do tell us how to stay connected and be a part of your community.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I currently offer a quantum shift personal transformation program in two versions, as a single one-off session and as a flexible mentoring program. And there is more information about it on my website at quantumliving.com.au. If anyone is interested to find out more, they can contact me through my website and we will take it from there. Other than that, so I've mentioned my website. People can connect with me on my Instagram, on my YouTube channel, and they can also subscribe to my regular Quantum Talk blog on Substack. In terms of the podcast, I would invite your listeners to obviously listen to my podcast, check it out, but not only on their preferred podcast app, but also to visit my main podcast website at quantumlivingpodcast.com, where they can find the full show notes with links. They can read my guest profiles, my podcast reviews, and leave their review if they wish to do so, and browse and listen to all the episodes across the 8 categories and 5 seasons.
So you can revisit quantum interspecies communication from several perspectives. Anna, it has been an absolute joy to have you on Let's Talk to Animals. Thank you so much for sharing so deeply from your heart about your personal story, your professional experiences, and your vision for what is possible as our species continues to evolve and wake up.
Thank you so much, Shannon. If I may, I would like to leave your audience with just my final thought and message. I'd like to invite and encourage your listeners to see the animals of all shapes and sizes, not as a subservient and inferior category of species, as toys, food, and entertainment, but as our closest friends, spiritual guides, and great wisdom teachers, without whom our life on this planet would not be as joyful, evolving, and fulfilling. Thank you so much.
What a beautiful benediction to close out our conversation, Anna. Thank you again from my heart, from the heart of the Let's Talk to Animals community. It has been a joy and a privilege to welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you.
And for you listening, especially if you are just now tuning in and you're just finding Let's Talk to Animals, a podcast all species can enjoy together, I just want to let you know that every 2 weeks we drop a fresh new episode. You never know exactly what to expect, except that it will have one common universal theme: the love for conversations that cross species boundaries. If you have any questions, if you have any ideas, maybe some ideas for future topics that have arisen as you've listened to this episode, I love to hear them. If you found value in this episode, please take time to leave us a review. It really helps our little podcast capture its share of the greater listening ears in the podcastosphere. And let me know over on Instagram. You can find me at Love and Feathers and Shells or at Animal Love Languages. Thank you again for being a part of our listening community. I am sending you all my love and bye for now.